Okay, today we're going to continue with our depository application. So we're going to look at the update to the responsive layout through CSS, and then after that we will continue with the user registration, and finally with login. Alright, so for the responsive layout, if you look at the my GitHub page, and if you try the codes, you should be able to see the following. So this is where your landing page is in the application home directory, and then user can choose either to log in and register. Okay, so user can go back to login and also to home. So this is basically the flow of our application, and also the web application also implement what we call as a responsive layout, which means that when the layout view in a much smaller form or resize into a much smaller page, user can see, or the page itself can adapt to the layout. So for example, like if we choose the following layout, such as in your mobile device, user can see their home, and if they click on login, they can also see the resize form. User click on register, they can see the resize registration form. So the view is much better if we open this web application through a smaller screen size. Alright, so the way that I implement this layout basically through CSS here. So CSS basically allow you to change the look and feel of your HTML page. So I use the what we call as the external CSS, where I put the file in one folder or in the CSS folder. So all the HTML page basically link or refers to the CSS through the link tag in the head section. So for example, like index.html here, you can see the link refers to the css/style.css, which basically use the same file, use the same CSS. For the login page here, also refer to the same CSS, and register page here also refers to the same CSS. Alright, so let's start with the index.html. So in the index.html, you should be able to see the I need to click on home. So you should be able to see the relationship between the page and the CSS. So if I remove the CSS link, this is external CSS. So if I remove the external page for the reference to the CSS, if I refresh the page, you will see this basic HTML page without any styling. if I enable the CSS, this CSS will apply all the styling needed or defined in the style.css. So how do we read or how do we understand this CSS? So that basically you need to open style.css and look for its particular styling. Alright, so for example, our basic index.html here, the head section. So the head section here, you can just straight away look if there's any head section apply here, and you can see I didn't do anything with the head section tag because most of the time in the head section we don't do any much of the styling, but we apply our style in the body section. So in the body section here, you start to see the particular styling for body. So the body here basically use font family type Arial, Helvetica and sans serif with margin set to 0. And then we look at particular divisions. So for this page, I divide into 3 sections. Header, which is this green section here. The second section for, not 3, but 4. Div section here for the navigation bar, this black bar here. And the third section, this is our main section. Our main section here, basically the white body section here, or the white section here that contain our content, and the final section is the bottom navigation. So each division labeled by class, and this basically correspond to header defined in this CSS. So if we look at the first at this header here, so when we put dot header, which basically refers to the class name. So for example, the class name here, header, and it will basically applies this header, right? So the header for this particular section, it will apply by this header section. So for example, like padding 25 pixel, text align center with the background color green and the text color white. But if you want to access, for example, like H1 or P inside the header class, you need to use this. Okay, you define the header class and the sub header, okay, the sub tag that you like to change, the sub properties that you like to change. So for example, like H1 here, so the H1 basically refers to H1 in here, in the header section, H1, right? So header section, this is our header class, H1. If you want to access the P, so all you need to do is you just add dot header P, and you can apply, let's say you want to change in terms of the color for the text. Okay, so you can choose any color that you like. So for example, let me change to red. Okay, let me change to this color. Alright, so this is just to show you what I mean by class and its properties. So let me refresh this, Control F5, so you can see now this particular paragraph change into this particular color. Alright, so that basically how you access, if you want to access by using class, you can use dot, and you can refer this through class. So it is basically the same with others. You look at navbar down there. So the navbar basically refers to this class. But if you want to access anything inside this this navbar, such as A here, so the navbar A will basically applies only to the link, to that particular link. Alright, so to that particular link. So in this case, the navbar defined by these two options, and the other one also, actually I can just put because I want to set this to the right, the A reference to the right, so I provide dot right, which allow me to have this login to the right. Okay, hover here allow user to, when user hover on top of this login, so it will change its color. So let me try to change to a much more subtle color. So for now this is black. If you want to change to different color, you just choose what color that you like to change to. Okay, so this is the text color when a mouse is hover on top of the link reference. For the bottom navigation, also the same. So you'll see that down here we have bottom nav for class. So bottom nav for class is basically the same with top. The only difference is that for the bottom navigation, I set the float. I don't set the bottom navigation to right. There's no need for me to set to right. For the top navigation, I set to right, should be no problem. But for the bottom navigation, I don't have to set to right. Yeah, because by default it will set to the left. But if I wanted for the bottom navigation to right, I can just change it here. It will go to the right. Okay, so actually you can just change the way that the navigation behave. But in this case, I've divided the navigation bar to top and bottom. Okay, but you can actually combine into one if you wanted everything to the left or to the right. So which means that you can just further simplify your CSS. For the responsive layout, okay, for the responsive layout, which means that for the image to follow what we call as a sizing, that can be done through, because I didn't change the image. Right, the image basically follows this image down here. There's my image here. But actually, if we wanted to set the image, we can use, or we can set the margin, okay, for the image margin. But in this case, we set to auto. But actually, I want it to be right in the middle here. Okay, so maybe I can look into this later. Right, so if you go into login screen, you'll be able to see the same. I try to keep the application, try to maintain the application consistency, so that for every page it will follow the same design guideline, and it retain the overall themes of the application, of the web application. But here you can see that I use what we call as a div to build my form. So for every div class container, So I built everything inside a container. This is the gray area here is a container. Inside this form, you can see that I implemented this JavaScript. You can see the JavaScript, and you'll see div divided into row and column. Okay, so this is row. Okay, so the first row basically contain column for label, and the second column for this input. Alright, so each of the class here you can refer back to styling. Okay, so it basically applies to that. So for example, like my input. So my input basically down here. This is my input, and this input basically applies to text, telephone number, and also for password and select. So because in my register section here, you will see that I do have different input type. So that will basically particularly will applies to that. Submit button down here, and for the submit button, I did subtle change in terms of the hover for the submit. So you can see that the text, the button color a little bit darker. So that basically apply to this CSS. The container color will always this color. If you like to change a different color, so that is up to you. For the column, all right. So the reason that I define column 25, column 25 is the division between label and also input here. All right. So the label and also input here, but I didn't manage to get the proper resize, because the reason being is that I wanted to implement responsive form such as this. So you can see that the form here will automatically adjust based on the screen size. You can see that the first name, the label goes up here, and then the input goes right underneath the label. But I'm not quite sure why my page unable to do this. Okay, so if I try to reduce the size, it will go to this limit only. I'm not quite sure why I'm unable to get that double layer. I already defined it in my CSS, which is in this section here. You will see that if the screen size is less than 600 pixel, it will change the column 25 to column and column 75 together with input, which allow for the resize width set to 100%, but it didn't seems to work. Right? But other than that, everything, all the pages here basically use the same styling. Right? So if you go big, login, home, login, register. So this is all basically follows the same design theme. Okay, so I think that is more than enough for the CSS and also responsive web design. Responsive layout, which allow us to get or to respond or to display the web UI based on different screen sizes. And this is particularly very important nowadays, because nowadays most of the web application access through a mobile browser, and you need to be able to adapt, or the page that or whatever web application that you built needed to be able to adapt to a smaller screen sizes. All right, so responsive form or responsive web is very, very important in today's world, to be able to build or to adapt to a much smaller screen sizes, or to support user who use mobile phone to access your web application. Alright, so I think that is more than enough for the CSS. So if you have any problem, you can just you can put it into group discussion. Okay, so now we need to be able to receive the data from a form. So how do we receive the data through form? There are two methods that we can use. One through post array and the other one through get array. So I did talk about this before. Post array basically encapsulate the data and send together with the form. Get array basically send through URL. And in our example here, we use get method. So for get method, we need to use our get array. So to use get array, we can just use the following instruction. So in PHP, what we need when we would like to assign with a value or we want to define a variable, we just use dollar and its variable name. So dollar name equal, and since this is a get array, we can just use get, and we need to define, or we need to get the value from our get array here. So our get array here basically define in these sections the name here. So this name, we put it into here, right? So variable get array name from this name here. So it goes the same for the second data that we need to get, which is email. I think it's email. Alright, so the same, get email, make sure it is basically the same. So the second one is email. The third data is phone. So dollar phone, get phone. And the fourth data is school. Alright, so this should be just school. One only, dollar school equal get school. And then we have two password. So password, password A equal get password A. And for dollar pass B equal password B. Missing here. So this is basically password, and password B basically comes from password A and password B. Now you receive the data and you have the data already. So let's just print out the value only. No need to do any other operation just yet. So to print out the data back to client, we just print out echo, echo, echo. We just echo everything. So this will return back to client what's basically the value that is being transmitted, and also a very good tools for us to use to check if the data has already been sent or not. So this is get array. So let me try this. We enter data and we press submit button. Oh, there's one here that is undefined. So you have your email, you have your name, your email, your phone number. This one you have ABC 123. So what we don't have is our school. Right, so we need to check our school. I believe that is because I've changed the schools to school. So one more time. Select my school and enter password. Press submit. Alright, so there you go. You can see the names here. Print out Sambaja email, phone number, schools, password A and password B. Alright, so now you have the data. You have the data already, so we can perform basic database operation, and in this case we want to insert data into database with all this data. Okay, with all this data we want to insert into database. Alright, so how do we do that? So the first thing that we need to do is to create database connector. Okay, we need to create our database connector. So our database connector here, we need to create one file. So normally I create one database connector. The reason is that I don't have to keep on creating or writing the same code all over again. So I just write it once in one particular file, and then I can just make reference to that file in all my other PHP later. Alright, so how do we do that? So the first thing, we need to create a file called dbconnect.php. So inside this file, we're going to need our basic PHP structure. Alright. So in here, this is where we need to define all the database parameter, but we don't have our database yet. Alright, we don't have our database yet. Let me just put it this way. So you have your, we already have our client UI here, our HTML. Alright, so client side, we have the page and form. Okay, so user form here, get the data, and then press button, submit all the data. Okay, you can submit either through the use of get array or post array. Alright, so get array, post array, so we pass the data to our server. So the server, the file who handle this data is server-side script, and we use PHP. So when PHP receives the data, all the data that we submitted through our form, so it will basically receive by this file here. Okay, so it receives a name, email, password, schools, and everything. It's all here, right? So what do we need? What else do we need now? We need to be able to connect to the database to store all the data that we receive. So to store all the data that we receive, we need a database. Alright, so we need a database. So our database here is MySQL database. So we need to create database. We need to create the we need to create all our fields and all the database configurations first. So I'm going to show this section now through phpMyAdmin. So you need to access phpMyAdmin. Oh, sorry, localhost first, and go to your phpMyAdmin here. Alright, so in XAMPP, you don't have to create your database separately if you want to create a database. In cPanel or in web hosting, you need to create your database first in separate menu, in a separate interface, and then later you can access phpMyAdmin because the menu basically is being separated from the database sections, create the database creation, and also the database management itself. So phpMyAdmin is the database management, and the other side is the database creation, where you need to set user and everything. Alright, so in XAMPP, you need to create database, just access the database menu here, tab, so provide the database name. So the database name, I'm going to give depository DB. Alright, so this is my database name, and then it is the best if you can just use if you want to give like database, because it's already a database, depository or DB depository, DB. Alright, so just create. Okay, now you can start to create a table. So we want to store all the data here. We want to store email, name, email, phone, schools, password A. We just want to store one password only, no need for password A, password B. This one, we can use this for comparison in PHP also. So I'm going to create a table. So the table name is table user. And how many columns are available? So we need to define how many columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the other one for the identification, maybe I'm going to use that also. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Date creation 6 and ID 7. So I can use email as ID, maybe. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I need 6 column. So go. Alright, so the first data that I need is email. Data type is normally I just use varchar. So size of the data, normally I set for email no more than 50 in terms of the size, should be no problem. I'm not quite sure if you want to be safe, you can put 100. Alright, so that is the first data, or maybe you can just use user email or email, so that is up to you to name your variable. The second data is phone. So phone number also varchar, even though it's a number, but normally we store this as a varchar value or text value. So phone number 01947024993, so 10 character. So if you want to add plus 0, so you can add 12 character for the phone. And then we have the name. So we need name also. So normally name, you can just put it here. Okay, just user's name. So varchar for name, we can, I think 100 is okay. School, varchar also, we can set the size for school. Let's say school not more than 150, the name of the school, or maybe to be safe, if there's any longer school's name, so we can set 150. And then password. Alright, so password normally we store as text or varchar, and that depend on the password, not encryption, because normally I use SHA-1 for encryption. Hashing, alright, so hash. So normally I use hash so that we don't store physical password, we store hash password. So for hash password, normally the length of the character for the password is 40. So we set the password to 40. So what is hash? And the one that I normally use is SHA-1. So SHA-1 basically is a hashing algorithm that will hash any value that you user provide into 40 character string. So like for example, ABC123, if you use SHA-1, it will generate the following text, and this is basically hash value, and normally cannot be reversed unless you use a dictionary value. But if you use any value or your password value or any strong value, it will generate this 40 character long, and you can use this and store this in your database. Alright, so this is 40 character long. So I'm going to use a password with SHA1. And finally, date reg. I'm going to use date register. So this one is, I'm going to take server time. So for server time, I'm going to use date time. Where is it? Timestamp or date time. Date time is this. Timestamp is this with UTC. I think actually the same both. You can use timestamp, date time, because you have date. Which is date time. So date time normally we define length 6, right? So this is basically the fields for our user for now, right? So I'm going to save this. I forgot to set email as a primary key so that you don't have user cannot register the same email twice. So press OK. Alright, so that is basically for table user. So now you have your table and we are now ready to connect to the database. So we have our database ready, but we need to have a connector to connect to database. So remember this file, database connector. So this is the file that responsible to perform database connector. Okay, so for the database connector, what we need now is to define the following value. Alright, so I'm going to use server name defined as localhost. The second variable that we need is the username. So for XAMPP, we can set the username as root. Password, XAMPP, we don't have password for XAMPP. And finally for the database name, so the database name basically refers to this depository DB. So depository underscore DB as our database name. Alright, so this is all the variable that we need to use for XAMPP. Okay, this is XAMPP only. So now we need to define our connector. So this is our connector. So the connector, you can use a different type of connector. So for the database connector here, this is there are multiple type of access or multiple type of connector that we can use or to connect to database. So in PHP, there are basically two types of connector, either MySQLi or PDO. So MySQLi or PDO. So the difference is that you can look into this article here. Which one that you should use? So we look at this first. So MySQLi basically, let me check this. Okay, so you can choose either way, which one that you like, but that depend on your server itself. Alright, so what I mean by this is that PDO, if you choose to use PDO, what we call as a PHP data object, so PDO can work on 12 different database systems. Okay, 12 different MySQL database system, because MySQL database, there's a number of it's not just one type of database. Okay, so for MySQL there are a number of database that support MySQL, and PDO can work on these 12 different database system. Okay, But for MySQLi, it will only works with which is the name of the database is MySQL database. Okay. For the PDO, it can work with 12 different SQL type database. MySQLi only works with this specific MySQL database. So that is the difference. It's not just for MySQL. If you look at MySQL, this is MySQL, right? If you look at MySQL, it basically specific to this open source MySQL database. But if you look at SQL database, okay, if you look at SQL database, there are a number of SQL database, right? There are a number of SQL database that you can choose from. Let's try to see. Google Cloud SQL, RDS SQL, Microsoft SQL, SQL Server. There's a number of SQL database available, which basically if you use PDO, it can support up to 12 different database type. Whereas if you use MySQLi, it will only support MySQL database, only one. All right. So in this class, I'm going to use PDO type connection. So which means that I'm going to use the following connector, PDO connector here. So for the PDO connector to work, I'm going to take this example. Okay, so we just take this one. We just take this code here. Or better, we just take everything and put it into, I'm going to put it here, sorry. I'm going to put it inside here. So what we need now, we need to check again, and our database name here also, we need to update database name. $db name, $db name equal depository underscore db. Alright, so this is our db name. So I'm just going to put the database name here. Is it? Hold on. Use db name equal mydb. So this is db name equal $db, username, password. Oh, no need for that. We just remove this. MySQL host. Okay, so we're going to use the following example from W3 Schools. So you can see that the server name, username, password, and DB name defined through the following connector. So when we set the object con here to new PDO, we pass all these parameter, which basically correspond to our XAMPP MySQL database. So for XAMPP, we define our server name as localhost, username as root, password empty, DB name depository DB. So when we try to connect to the database, if something goes wrong to the connection, it will print out this error message. If not, it will print out connected successfully. So now we can try this DB connect and see if you are able to connect to the database or not. So all you have to do is just type in localhost depository php/db connect.php. So if you type in dbconnect.php, you should be able to get this connected successful. Alright, so if something goes wrong inside here, like for example, I misplaced the name here, miswrite the names here, so I try to connect again, you will get this error called unknown database depository dbd. So because the name, I purposely gave the wrong name in here. Alright, so that basically for your database connector. So once you connected this successfully, so you don't have to use the connected successful anymore. So you can just remove that and you'll be done with it. Right. So for this, once you remove that echo, if you try to connect again, it will show nothing because we removed that echo. So this file later will be used in here. We are going to include this database connector together in the register.php. And this is very important file later on. If you try to move this to a server, you need to configure this file first before you are able to you move your application to your web hosting. Alright, so how do we use this into our application? Alright, so to include this into our application, into our register.php here, we need to add the following. Alright, so I'm going to add the following include statement, include once. So what do we include? We include the dbconnect.php, so which allow us to, sorry, the name of the file. This is the name of the file, should be in a string. So inside this directory, so you have to include once. So once you include once, you should be able to use the database connector as part of your registration process. Alright, so now once we're done with the connector, so now we can just remove all this, remove all echo here. We remove all echo and then we can start building our SQL query. So to register, we need to use insert statement. So I'm going to build a string. So let's say SQL register equal the following statement. So this is where we build our SQL query. So to insert into database, we need to give the following SQL statement. Insert into the table name. So our table name here called table user. Table user. So we need to provide all the value, all the field that we define in our database. So our field here is this: email, phone, name, school, password. Alright, so we need to define that. Email, phone, email, phone name, school, and password. Right. But this is, let me turn blue. This means that this is a mostly reserved word, but we'll see. We just use that first. Alright, because it turned to blue, this normally indicate that this is a reserved word for this statement. So we use all the table field here, email, phone, name, school, and password. And then the value that we like to insert, the values basically comes from the variable up here. So we start with name, and then the second data is email. The third data is phone. Fourth data is school. And the last data is pass. We don't have that. The variable here is pass A. So we just use pass A for now. Alright, just use pass A for now. So you have now the insert statement into table user with the following values. Okay, so this is the SQL statement. But this is not yet complete. We need to execute the statement. So how do we execute? So to execute, we can actually use the database connector that we define from DB Connect. Execute using the following PDO statement: query $register, $SQL register. Alright, so this is basically just very simple statement to execute the SQL register insert statement. But we need to have what we call as a verification or confirmation. So we need to check if the statement is correct or not. So if this is true, means that if this is success, if this is true, we let user know echo registration success, else we just echo back registration fail or failure. Okay. Alright, so now we have a simple registration script that allow user to register with the data, with the form. So let us try this, and just to make sure that the instructions or the script is working or not. So for now, we don't have any data. You can just click on this table user, no data at all. So let us provide some data. So I'm going to access this, refresh. I'm going to add my names, email, phone number, schools. I'm going to select one schools here with password ABC123, ABC123, and press this submit button. So this one is a registration failure. So we need to check what's wrong with the registration. Actually, it's not a failure. It's only that it uses the data is there, and I forgot to update a few things. Let me delete this data again. Alright, so structure, this one. Okay, I need to change my date reg. I forgot to set this default timestamp to current time. And my phone, it's supposed to submit phone, but this phone here, I didn't receive phone. Let me check one more time. Schools, it's supposed to receive phone, but the first one is email. Oh yeah, the structure is here is wrong. So I need to rearrange that again. So we start with email, not name. So I'm going to take this email. We start with email, phone, and name. Right, so email, phone, name, schools, and pass A. All right, one more time. So if the query is success, if there's no error in the execution of the SQL statement here, we should be able to get registration success. All right, one more time. Go back, refresh our page here, and enter our credential, phone number, school, select one, password ABC123, and press submit button. Why is it that you return registration a failure? So even though the data is here, I do have my email, I do have my phone, name, school, and password with date registration, but the instructions execute return error. Why is that? Let me show how to check. So I'm going to echo this. I just want to check, all right, what's wrong with the instructions. So to check, what you need to do now is to delete the data first and rerun the page. Okay, I'm going to resubmit the data and press submit button. The things that I wanted now is this. I wanted to see this SQL statement, and I'm going to take this one. All right, I'm going to take this, and I want to see why it returned registration failure. So take these instructions here, and you need to go. I'm going to delete this one more time. You need to go to this SQL tab here and enter that statement, this one. All right, so this SQL terminal here. So all you need to do now, just press this go, and you should be able to see if there's any error. There's no error at all here, so which mean that the data also show everything is correct. Nothing wrong with the data, but somehow it printed out a fail. Connection, query, SQL register. What's the reason behind this? Okay, so there's a few updates here. Just remove the if statement. So I mistakenly used the MySQLi instruction, I believe. But we just go ahead and use these instructions where we just execute our SQL register through the use of execute functions here. All right, so to try that once again, we can just go back and delete the data inside here. Okay, no longer data in there, and then enter one data. Right, so you should be able to see your data in here with all the required data. But as I mentioned before, the password here, we need to somehow hash the password so that we don't store naked password. So to do that, we need to update our codes with the following. So the reason that why I pass to value here, pass A, pass B, we can do server side check, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to straight away use the following features that's basically available. SHA pass equal SHA1, and we just use these two to convert this into SHA1. So I'm going to store this value instead of pass A, SHA pass, right? So let me try that one more time and see the result. So delete it and just submit and check again our data. So now you see the password change to this SHA1 value. Alright, so it's no longer store naked password or readable password. Alright, so that is the registration process, and of course if you want, for now we didn't have much in terms of the response. So if you wanted to, if the registration is a success, we can just do this. We can just execute a simple script. So delete this one more time. So let me update with these simple instructions. I'm going to use try execute these instructions. So if the execution is a success, we can just echo the following. So script show an alert back to user and let the user know that the registration is success or registration success. But if there's an error in the execution of the PDO, we just print out echo registration failed. Sorry, we need to use this because we already used that outside. And echo, we just take this echo registration failed. Okay, so with this, what happened is that if user register, submit, you will get this info box or this alert that letting you know that the registration is success. But if I wanted to register again with the same password, or sorry, with the same email, submit, you will get registration fail because the server already store this, already register this email address. But then again, once the registration is a success, we can just go to the login page from there, or if it is failed, we can just go back to this register HTML, and I think we can do that from here. We can just use another JavaScript that allow us to go to the back to the so if registration is success, we can just go back to, we can just go to the login script, we can just go to the login Okay, we can just go to the login through the use of window.location.replace. We want to go to the HTML which is in the HTML.login. Is it login dot? Our file name is login index register login.html. Login.html. Alright, so we wanted once the alert shows, we go to the following page. If it is failed, we go back to the register or registration HTML. Let's try this one more time. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to register, submit, registration fail. So it goes back to the same page. I'm going to delete the data. So try to register one more time to simulate a success registration. Success, registration success. Press OK. You will go back. You will go to the login page. Alright, so that's basically how it is being done to register user. I think that is more than enough for this class. And in your next class, we're going to look at the login, and we're going to move from there to the main page. Alright, so that's all for today. So see you in your next class. If you have any question, you can put it into the comment section. Alright, bye bye.